How's it going, everyone? As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. This is PSReady, my channel all about PlayStation. In today's video, I've got three great topics for you guys. The first one is that if you want this PS5 upgrade, you're going to have to pay up. The second one is that your PS5 is about to just beat all your games for you, and that is not even close to clickbait. It's just literally true. And finally, is the PS4 finally dead for good? So let's jump into this first news story, which is about paying up for this new PS5 upgrade. Back on April 25th, Bethesda released the next-gen update for Fallout 4, which is pretty good for consoles. It adds in multiple new graphics modes like a 60 FPS performance mode. Well, it targets 60 FPS. You can't really get a locked 60 out of Fallout 4. Like, for an example, I'm playing on my 4090 PC, and when I go downtown Boston and I start exploring down there, as soon as I go inside, like, the frame rate, it's a little bit jittery. It goes between like 58 and 60 FPS, and I'm assuming that with the power of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, you'll run into the same issues. You're going to get a graphics mode which runs at a pretty much locked 30 FPS. The game has never had trouble with that because it was actually built with 30 FPS animations in mind. And then finally, if you have a 120 Hz enabled TV, you can take advantage of a 40 FPS mode, which is the perfect sweet spot. That's where I would play. If you guys didn't know, I have a channel called Deck Ready that's all about the Steam Deck, and a lot of modern games, while they can't hit a lock 60 on the Steam Deck, they can hit 40, and you'll really struggle to tell the difference, honestly, between 40 and 60 because it's perfectly in between the two. There's also a ton of new workshop additions to the game, which is really cool if you're someone who's insane like me and actually loves engaging with the settlement system in Fallout 4. I almost called it the camp system, but that's what it's called in Fallout 76, and it's awesome if you've never messed around with it. And finally, there's a new Enclave questline, which is cool because it was created by a modder. It wasn't created by Bethesda, so they're going to get money for being able to put their questline in this new next-gen update. The problem is, though, if you ever claim this game on PlayStation Plus, on PS5, you're not going to be able to get this upgrade unless you pony up and pay for the game. And to add insult to injury, people who play the game on Xbox Game Pass, they get the upgrade for free. And the thing that I think is causing this is that this is not a patch like we saw with The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima that brought those games up to 60 FPS. This is a new version of the game for PS5 and Xbox Series consoles, so your PS5 is seeing it as two different games. We saw the same thing happen with Final Fantasy VII Remake, where when that was offered up, the PS4 version, I mean, on PS Plus Essential, once they released the integrated version, people would have to pay to upgrade to the integrated version on their PlayStation 5s. Eventually, Square Enix kind of got rid of that rule, but I think it took almost a year, and it's honestly pretty frustrating, especially since, you know, the game is available for free to Game Pass users on the Xbox side of the fence. The silver lining here, though, is that Fallout 4, it's just cheap as hell these days. You guys know I've been trying to get a bunch of physical games, especially from my PS4 backlog, stuff I got on PS Plus or downloaded digitally back in the day. I went on eBay. You can get copies of Fallout 4 for like $1 at this point. Now, if you pay the super dirt cheap price, you're probably not getting a case, or you're getting one with like dog teeth marks in it or something like that. But for the healthy price of $5, I was able to get a pretty much brand new copy, and it even came with the Vault-Tec Explorer's Guide, and it also came with the perk poster you got back in the day, which was really cool considering I bought this game on PC when it came out, just because, you know, when you're playing Fallout, if you have a PC, you're going to play it on PC. I didn't get it physically. I bought it on Steam, so I got a digital file of this poster, and I tried to print it at Staples, and it looked like shit, if I'm being honest. So I'm actually going to frame that in this game room that I have down here in the basement. Also, the game is only $5 on the PlayStation Store right now at the time I'm recording this video. You can also get copies of it used at GameStop for dirt cheap, so it's not really the biggest pain in the ass to get this upgrade for free, but still, it is annoying, again, considering it's free over on the Xbox Game Pass side. And I'm assuming this is not a Sony error because Square Enix had the same thing happen. It's just like a money grab, I guess, from Xbox, which is super frustrating because you didn't get the game for free. You got it as a benefit from something you already pay for. So you're already paying money every month to get PS Plus Essential. You should be able to upgrade the game for free, just like people who are paying for Game Pass every month, right? I still think the game is worth buying to get this upgrade just so you can get that 60 FPS or 40 FPS mode. It's still a pretty dang good looking game. I know Bethesda right now, people are hating on them, but I've been doing a full playthrough of Fallout 4 over the past couple of weeks, and I just don't think there's very many open world games that I enjoy as much as this one. There's some jank There's a lot of weird loading screens. The AI is pretty bad, but the core combat and the loop of the game and the exploration, I still feel is kind of unmatched by pretty much any game out there. So if you want to give it a shot, I think you really should just pay for this next gen upgrade. And also, I've been kicking around the idea of starting up a channel to talk about games more at length. So if that's something you'd be interested in, please let me know down in the comments below. That brings us to the second news story, which is that Sony just patented a feature for the PlayStation 5 and presumably the PS5 Pro and 6 that's going to literally play your games for you. Of course, this is enabled by AI. So what they're presumably going to do is have an AI that like watches people who hopefully have to consent to this, like opt into this feature, play games, right? And you get to a boss fight like Millennia, for example, in Elden Ring, and it'll watch a bunch of people who are just absolutely steamrolling Millennia. And when you get to that point in the game and you're beating your head against the wall with that boss, your PS5 is going to be like, hey man, I can just like take over for a minute and beat this boss for you. And then the AI is going to actually play the game and skip that part of the game. They're also talking about this being able to do it in rest mode. So if you beat your head against the wall and say, hey, I'm logging off for the night, go ahead, take the controls, take the reins. While your PS4 is off, it's going to just play through that part of the game, and then you'll be at the next spot of the game the next time you come back. And honestly, like all opinions aside, this is really cool tech. Like it's a cool feature, but I'm just like, I don't know. Why are you playing video games if you don't want to and play video games? That's like the feeling I have at the end of the day. And before you say, well, it's an accessibility feature, if it is marketed as an accessibility feature, I've got no problem with it. But like for the average person out there, like video games are not made to be not beat, right? Like unless you're talking about Raid Shadow Legends or something like a mobile free-to-play game, most games I would think are made with the intention that you'll be able to beat them. And how many times have you been in this situation where you're playing Elden Ring or God of War and you're just beating your head against a side boss or Millennia or any boss really, or any part of the game, and you just get to that point at midnight where you're like, I've got work tomorrow, I've got to go to bed, I'm giving up. And then right before work, you wake up a little bit early, you fire up your PS5, you're right at the point where you left off, and then you beat that boss first try. I know you've had that experience out there because my whole childhood was that. When games were too hard, I would just go to bed pissed off, I'd wake up still angry, I'd turn on my PS2, PS3, Xbox 360, whatever it was, and I would steamroll the absolute shit out of that boss. Like you can do it. You don't need your console to play games for you. That's just not the way that I think games should be made to be played. If you really want to know why Sony's making this feature, it really comes down to this new buzzword, this new metric that's taking over the industry, which is engagement. We see it all the time with services like Xbox Game Pass, where instead of saying Starfield is the best-selling Bethesda game of all time, they've been saying that it's the most played Bethesda game of all time, right? Like more people downloaded it through Xbox Game Pass, more people bought it on Steam or on their Xbox Series X and played the game for a long period of time. And then they can say, oh, a lot of people engaged with this game. Let's see what worked and what didn't. And then they're saying, oh, this game got totally cannibalized by Game Pass, but we don't have to say that. We can just say that it's like got high engagement. So what Sony is doing is they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, we looked at all the player stats for Elden Ring, and when people get to Millennia, they traditionally bounce off the game, even though they're pretty damn close to the end of the game. So they're adding in this feature to keep engagement high, because if you're playing games longer on your PlayStation 5, that's what they want at the end of the day, because they've got so many outside influences to compete with, like YouTube TV, Xbox, Nintendo Switch, mobile games, anything really, TikTok. All that stuff is taking your attention away from your PlayStation 5, and by their logic, if you're on your PlayStation 5 longer, you're going to have a better experience and buy more games and spend more money. Yeah, I don't know. I get it from a business standpoint, but I don't have to like it, and I really just, yeah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. What really got me thinking about this though, before I even saw this news story, was someone wrote into the Sacred Symbols podcast, which is my favorite podcast. It's really the only one I listen to. And they said they're a therapist, and a way that they help people get over mental blocks where they feel like they're not able to make progress in life, or they just get jammed up by anxiety, is by playing hard games like Dark Souls. There are games that are set up in a way where they have big senses of personal accomplishment when you do something in the game. And when people play through these games and they beat their head against the wall with a boss and they sit down and say, no, I can do this. This thing was made to be beat and I can do it. It helps them in their everyday life. And if you just give people all these different ways to skip through all of the like harder parts of a video game, I mean, you're just training them to just sit there and be passive and not really really take control of things. I know the classic response to this is like, oh, they robbed you of the experience by putting in an easy mode. And that's just like a super reductive way to talk about something really cool, which is personal accomplishment. When you do things that you put your mind to and you work hard at them and then you accomplish them, you feel better. I mean, I think that applies to everyone at the end of the day. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk on that, but it's just something I think about a lot, right? It'd be a lot worse if they were forcing you into this, but like, I know when you get that option, right? Like when you're playing a game like Fallout Shelter and you're like, man, I really need a new character right now. I don't want to wait for the radio to call someone in. It's just so easy to spend a little bit of money to get a lunchbox that might have a really cool character in it. And that's what they're doing here. I don't think they're going to charge for this at first, at least, but if it's something that really takes off, you bet your ass that it's something they're going to either add into PlayStation Plus later or charge you for eventually. So yeah, speaking of engagement, I can't wait to get to the engagement part of the graph in this video where it just literally drops off a cliff when I start talking about personal accomplishment, but don't let them rob you of that with this dumb feature they're developing for the PS5 Pro and 6. And that brings us to the third news story, which is a question, and that question is the PS4 finally dead? I saw an article on The Gamer where someone was like, oh, the PS4 is still really good in 2024, and the two games they listed were Baldur's Gate 3 and Judgment, which, like, I don't know, I feel like those are just really bad examples because Baldur's Gate 3 is a turn-based, slow-paced RPG, and Judgment is a game that isn't really pushing the envelope in terms of gameplay or graphics. But then it got me thinking, like, could I effectively play the PS4 in 2024? And the answer, thankfully, I came to was no. In the first few years of the PS5's life cycle, like honestly up to 2023, the answer probably would have been yes, just because every big game, whether you're talking Horizon Forbidden West, Gran Turismo 7, God of War Ragnarok, any third-party game you could list right now, including Elden Ring, they all came out on PS5 in addition to PS4. And for the most part, giving credit to developers here and publishers, those games ran and looked pretty dang good on PS4. Like, yeah, you would notice the difference between The Last of Us Part 2 on PS5 and PS4 Pro because The Last of Us Part 2 on PS5 runs at a hard lock 60 FPS at a really high resolution, but it was more than playable because you were just staying at the benchmark you were always at in the last generation, which was either 1080p or an upscaled 4K at a locked 30 frames per second. The last game to really be cross-gen that probably shouldn't have been was Resident Evil 4. You should go watch the Digital Foundry breakdown of that game, but if you were playing that on PS4 or PS4 Pro, you were getting like 720p and a not anywhere close lock at 30 FPS. And since then, not a lot of games have been coming out cross-gen. I mean, this year alone, Dragon's Dogma 2, Rise of the Ronin, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and I'm sure plenty of other games did not come to the PlayStation 4 and exclusively came to the PS5 and Xbox Series X. I think that's a good thing because I want the PS5 to thrive and do well, but if you're someone who's been holding on to the PS4, I would not go out right now and buy a PlayStation 5 because the PS5 Pro is coming out later this year. And even if you're someone who's, penny pinching, you don't know if you want to spend the extra $100 or so that you'd have to spend to get the PS5 Pro, wait and see what the developers do, because there's this epidemic of unfinished games right now where we've all been there. You play a game at launch, it runs at like 40 FPS in frame rate mode and goes like between 40 and 60 depending on what you're doing. It's like subpar at best experience, and then suddenly you grab the game a year later off your shelf that you paid $70 for, you play it, it's finally finished, and then you look at the sales of the game and it's already $20 and you kick yourself in the ass because you're like, if I had just waited to play Jedi Survivor, I could have only paid $20 for it and got a locked 60 frames per second out of the game. So to answer the question of whether or not the PS4 is dead, I think if it's not dead, it's on its deathbed. I don't think this thing has much life in it, and if we get any updates for it going forward, it's just going to be software stability and performance updates like we're already starting to see on the PlayStation 5. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear yours down in the comments below. Remember to subscribe and set your notifications to all if you haven't already. As always, my name is Jimmy Champagne. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, and shape on.